Hi, this is Minetta at the Dwight Foster Public Library in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, and today I wanted to tell you about some of my favorite novels in verse for children and young adults. If you're not familiar with them, novels in verse look like poetry on the inside with the way the words appear on the page, but they tell a full story from the beginning to the end. So it's a little bit different than straight poetry. It tells a full story just like a novel would. So this book I really enjoyed. It's called Inside Out and Back Again by Tang Halai. This book is about a young girl who was born in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. So she's growing up in a war-torn country, and then her family relocates to Alabama, and you read about her adjustment to life in Alabama. The Crossover by Kwame Alexander is another amazing novel in verse. This book is about twin brothers who play basketball, and they're also just going through middle school, so you read about that as well. Kwame Alexander likes to do fun things with the placement of the words on the page. So you'll see sometimes it looks just like straight poetry, but then sometimes he does really fun things with where the words show up on the page that kind of reinforce what you're reading about. And then another children's book in verse is Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. This is nonfiction, autobiographical about Jacqueline Woodson's childhood in South Carolina and also in New York. Now let's look at a few novels in verse for young adults. I just read this book and I thought it was very impactful. It's called Kent State by Deborah Wiles, and it's about the Kent State massacre. And when you're reading it, she has lots of different voices, and she doesn't label the voices, but as you're going along, you get used to the placement of the voices on the page and the font, so you get to know all these different speakers even though you don't know who they are, but you feel like you can see these people speaking with all their different perspectives on what happened at Kent State. This book is very timely. It makes me think a lot about what's going on with current events. I highly recommend Kent State, and it's a very short read, so I think adults will love this book as well. To Stay Alive by Skylar is about the Donner Party. So you probably already know what happened with the Donner Party. This book is very dark, understandably. It's gruesome, but it's also gripping and fascinating. There is some really intense foreshadowing at the beginning because I'm sure you know what happened with the Donner Party. You know what's going to happen, and you're just reading about the events leading up and how they ended up in the situation they ended up in. I wouldn't have necessarily expected to really enjoy a book about the Donner Party, but I really did. The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I've talked about this book before, but I love it, and it helped me discover that I love novels in verse usually. It's about a young woman who is discovering her love of spoken word poetry. And then another book by Elizabeth Acevedo that I've mentioned before is Clap When You Land. This book is about two girls. Their father dies in a plane crash, and they discover that they are actually sisters when they didn't know that the other one existed previously, and they get to know each other. And then finally, another book that I've mentioned before, Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, is about gun violence. And Jason Reynolds also likes to do interesting things with where he places the words on the page. And if you like listening to audiobooks, you can listen to Jason Reynolds read Long Way Down himself, which is another really great way to experience this book. Or if you're like me, you can read it and then you can listen to it as well. There's a lot to think about with that book, so it's a good one to read over again. So those are some of my favorite novels in verse for children and young adults. I'd love to know what novels in verse you've read and enjoyed. Thanks for watching.